Welcome to the Hidden Why podcast. This is episode 1112, Understanding the Human Experience with Robert Kurzban. Enjoy. Hey, Robert, welcome to the Hidden Why podcast. Great to have you here today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You've got a lot going on in our little pre-convo there.
Yeah, a little bit. Keep busy,
How do you get clarity around everything that's going on and not be overwhelmed by it?
Well, I'm one of the many people who came to meditation a little bit later in life, and I should probably do more of it than I do. But I think that a lot of these people who show some wisdom are right that having 10, 20 minutes when you're not thinking about anything, pretty valuable. I think it really helps center you, helps keep things in perspective. I'm not sort of messianic about it. I don't try to persuade other people, but I found it really valuable.
You found it valuable. Well, tell us a bit about your background, first and foremost, and then let's get into some deep topics here.
Yeah. So I was born into the sort of academic world as a psychologist. I studied out in California with two scholars. The discipline, we style ourselves evolutionary psychologists. So that's a field where people try to apply insights from Darwin and evolution by natural selection to understand human behavior. An important part of it is it takes very seriously the fact that humans are evolved creatures and our minds are sort of computation devices. So it takes a cognitive view very seriously. So I started out there, I got my PhD in 1998 at Santa Barbara. And then I spent a couple years with economists, which had a really big effect on me. I spent 2 years with economists at the University of Arizona with Vernon Smith, who after I was in his lab, he would go on to win the Nobel Prize. And then another couple of years I spent with a little bit of more economists, but then a couple of years with anthropologists, a guy named Rob Boyd at UCLA, also had a tremendous effect. Then I went to the University of Pennsylvania, where I took a job in the psychology department, and mostly pursued areas of group cooperation, morality, and to some extent, some of the things which I hope we'll talk about, which is the human experience. So where do our feelings come from? Why do we have them? What are they doing there? And how does knowing that maybe help us out a little bit? Right now, I hope so. Right now I'm running a little Substack called Living Fossils. That's where I get that's where my creative energy is being focused. And I also, run a nonprofit. Anyway, that's the background. So yeah.
Like I said, lots going on. You got a couple of books out there as well. Why Everyone is a Hypocrite, to name one of them. And you've also got The Hidden Agenda of the Political Mind, which is of interest too for a lot of people at the moment with the elections coming up, both where you are and where we are here in Australia. And this new idea we were just talking about, phenomenology. It's a hard word to say, isn't it? Phenomenology. All about the human experience. Tell us a little bit about what this genre is. I mean, has it been around a while?
Well, yes and no. I mean, if you could say that in many ways you could trace it all the way back to Aristotle, who thought about the human experience and what it was like to be conscious, and then certainly the serious philosophy in some sense in the Western canon comes along with Descartes trying to think about he thought, therefore he was. So that was all about his thought and his experience of the world. I'll tell you my origin story, which is very strange. So I got puzzled by the fact. One of the weird things about being a psychologist is that you start to find very normal things kind of strange and puzzling, and that's when you feel like you're onto something. So I don't know if you've ever experienced this.
An example of something?
Yeah. So let me give you an example. Like, when we're doing math problems, it can feel very effortful. Like I had to take a whole bunch of exams to do, to get into school and so on. So on the one hand, like it can be very unpleasant to have this experience. On the other hand, you have something like Sudoku. I don't know how big that is down under, but
I love it.
Yeah. So there you're doing some math, but it's pleasurable, right? The first one you would pay not to do it, like the SATs or the GRE, whatever. And the second one you pay to do it, which is sort of interesting. So I got really interested in this question of what is the feeling of effort doing from an evolutionary view? So our view is, my view is that all these feelings that have some function, they were doing something for us over evolutionary time. And man, I thought about that for a long time. And I came to the conclusion that it was really it's basically evolution's way of trying to tell you, are you sure you want to keep doing what you're doing? Is this a good use of your time? It's kind of like a little stop rule. It's basically saying, you're burning a lot of cycles in your brain. You're not getting a lot of reward for it.
Mm.
Maybe you should move on to something else. And that led me to think about all the different kinds of sensations that people have and asking this question, what's that for? Don't get me wrong, some are sort of really obvious, right? Like there's a reason it hurts when someone burns your hand, right? So you don't burn your hand anymore, take it away from the fire. But then there's others like effort and boredom, which is sort of the reverse of it. So what's boredom about? Why do we feel that, or satisfaction is another one that I've sort of thought was really fun. I've written a little bit about ticklishness. Like, why do we find, like, if you're a little kid and someone touches you gently, why does that like kind of feel good up to a
what's
point?
the purpose of it? Would you think? Like, is that
Yeah, yeah. What's the
this field
function
of
of it?
phenomenology? Is it about feelings, or is it
Exactly.
about something bigger than that around the human experience?
Well, I mean, I think those two things are sort of very closely linked. I mean, our
Yeah.
experiences in some sense in the world, we're just sort of like, I think of myself as I'm just the sum total of everything that I feel. That's all that I have is like my phenomenology, my conscious experience. And
But if you
that, I
took
think
away
that
the conscious experience and this level of feeling,
yeah, what would we be? We'd be zombies, right? Just, I think what makes us human is that we experience the world. And I think a lot of it is still, at least to me, is still very mysterious and worth exploring. Again, like some of those examples, boredom and effort, satisfaction. Uh, there's weird things. So I don't know about you, but do you ever pop those bubbles in packing material?
yeah, yeah, yep.
It's like weirdly satisfying. And I
Kids love it
think
too.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it can also be calming. There's something kind of zen about it. So I just think there's lots of very few people have tried to marry on the one hand the idea that you've got an evolved mind, and on the other hand, the conscious experience. Not that no one has. I'm not saying I've invented the field, but I don't think anyone has systematically gone through and tried to get all of them to try to figure out what are all these different feelings doing for us.
Okay. Where do you see the benefit? Well, I guess there's going to be benefits there, but understanding these feelings, like you said, I guess the curious mind, like you talk about the Sudoku or the maths test. And on one hand, the Sudoku we do when we go through it, and there's no real, I mean, yeah, there's the reward of completing it,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
you're quite
Well,
happy to put in the effort and the time to do it. Whereas a maths test, maybe you'd be like, oh, can't be bothered putting in the time to study for
yeah.
that and doing that.
Yeah, but so yeah, just to pick up on your question about what's the use of it. So, I have a close friend who's a clinical psychologist, and so we've been thinking a lot about sort of the difference between the environments which humans evolved and the current environment and ways in which that could kind of can mislead us, this mismatch. And the example that we always use is anger.
Hmm.
I mean, I live in Philly, and so it's very easy to get very angry here. People ask me how I like, what Philly's like. It's a very angry city, is the way I always describe it. So if you're on a road and someone, cuts you off or whatever, probably you feel anger. And the reason you do, from an evolutionary perspective, is that, when people do things to harm you, you want to make sure they don't do it again, right? So you want to kind of, be motivated to impose costs on them, to harm them back, because that's how you deter subsequent harms. So your evolved brain is saying, you've got to stop this person from hurting you again. And what I think the value of that is to say, oh, yeah, I'm really angry right now at this person who I will never see again. And that's not going to be helpful for me to indulge that anger. And this goes back to sort of the meditation piece, which is one of the things we here, I mean, Josh, he encourages his patients to think about is, why am I feeling this feeling? Why do I have this motivation? So, I've just, had this experience where someone's, maybe irritated me or caused me some pain or discomfort or what have you. And, I think a good question is, well, yeah, to think about evolution wants you to say, don't make sure that person doesn't do it again. But in this
Yeah.
world, which is a very anonymous world where people come and go, is it going to help me to chase this guy down and maybe get into some kind of a conflict? And who knows how that escalates? So, understanding where these feelings are coming from the evolutionary view, I think it can have some real life consequences. When you feel something, it's helpful to ask, what I always put it this way. I always say, what's Darwin
Yeah.
trying to get me to do? It's like
Yeah.
Darwin's
Yeah.
whispering in your ear, like, get that guy, he's going to do it again. Like, and then if you stop and say, well, And I think that's important for even for something like, as we were talking about, effort. I mean, I always try to work CrossFit into these conversations just because, everyone who does CrossFit wants to make sure everyone knows. So like sometimes when I'm working out, yeah, I mean, that's just, I admit it. So when you're working out, you also have a sensation of effort, right? And the question is, why is that? And basically that's Darwin's way of saying, look, unless you're getting a lot of benefit from this, whatever you're doing, like if you're running away from a bear and it's unpleasant to run, you should still keep running because the benefits of avoiding being eaten by a bear outweigh the cost of burning the calories and so on. And that's where their effort. And sometimes when I'm working out and I feel this, this unpleasantness, I say, okay, that's just evolution's way of saying
I'm running away from the bear.
Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I can keep running from the bear. Yeah, I can keep going for another minute or two. And that, I mean, that's just me. So that's a very personal thing, but that helps me maintain my motivation a little bit.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, these feelings like that feeling of anger, you think back to the evolutionary history of why the feelings exist, and it's really to protect us and to keep us with survival, right? Is that your understanding?
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I mean, all these feelings have different functions. I got interested for some strange reason recently in even just really basic stuff like the urge to breathe. So a lot of people think that the reason that you start feeling like you've got to want to breathe and you're holding your breath is that you're running out of oxygen. That's sort of true. But it actually turns out that the reason is that you have too much carbon dioxide. So your system is measuring how much CO2 is in your blood. And as that goes up, you get this really strong urge to breathe. Now, you might say, well, okay, same thing, but why does that matter? Well, it matters in some contexts. For example, you might be in an environment, and I just wrote a little bit about this, where there were some NASA engineers in an environment that was pure nitrogen. And so their carbon dioxide and their oxygen levels were both going down, but they didn't realize it because our system is designed to monitor how much CO2 we have, not how much oxygen we have. So they didn't have that sort of panic sensation that you get if you're underwater and you're holding your breath, for example. So it's just super interesting, and at least to me. And so I do think that, looking at the details of how our little conscious system works can have surprisingly interesting implications for the way we live our lives. Jealousy is another example. If my partner is sort of looking too long at George Clooney on the in the film we're watching, that's my system saying, look, this is a threat to me. I want to maintain this relationship. But then if you stop and think about it, you're like, well, George Clooney is not. I mean, I'm sure he would be lucky to have her. Let me be very clear. But you know what I mean? He's not a threat to that relationship. It's just I have that feeling because I'm designed to protect that relationship. That's to keep that relationship safe.
Yeah.
And so, so I'm saying.
They're really a good way to put things in context. And I guess as a psychologist or in the field of psychology, dealing with people that are having these feelings that really do, they're not constructive to their life, They actually put them in a spot where they're every day irritated, bothered, angry, feeling, about the world and life. And I think there's a lot of that right now. Yep, sorry.
I was just going so I don't mean to, but I was just going to say, so my co-author, Josh, on fossils, this also has an implication in the clinic, in the lab, in the clinic, for patients. And so, you have people coming in and say, I'm feeling a little detached from my social world and that makes me a little bit sad. And one of the things he tells me is that he has these conversations. He explains to his patients, well, yeah, that is what you'd expect because we live in this very impersonal world where most of the people we come across are not our friends. In the past, we would have woken up and we would have known everybody who was around us for, in the village or wherever it was. And it normalizes certain kinds of feelings that you might otherwise think, why am I feeling so alienated from society? And the answer is, well, you live in a very odd society. That's not the one that we are designed to live in. That can be helpful to patients to say, oh, this is not pathology. This is not, I'm having an unpleasant reaction. Yeah, but a normal unpleasant reaction because of the mismatch between the way I live today and the way our ancestors lived in the past.
Well, yeah, and like you said, like the cutting off example, I mean, it's a classic example, isn't it? Someone cutting you off in the car and you're getting angry over it. And it's kind of novel or humorous, really, to think about, you say, why am I feeling that way? Like, kind of silly, isn't it? And when you think of it like that, you sort of, that feeling can dissipate really quick.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And the reverse too. I mean, you know, public speaking is extremely anxiety provoking for many
Yeah,
people.
I
And,
know.
and so one way to think about that is, well, under normal circumstances, if you've got a big audience in front of you, there's pretty big social stakes because people are going to draw some inferences about who you are and how articulate you are and how well you do under pressure. And so, and of course, over time, people have developed little ways to, imagine the audience upside down and naked or whatever it is that people do. Um, I think it's also helpful to think, okay, yes, I understand why evolution is making this stressful for me because you want to devote a lot of attention in a high stakes situation. But by the same token, many of these times it's not as high stakes as your body thinks it is. It's your whole physiology is telling you, oh my God, I'm in front of 100 people, and in 20,000 years ago, that's all there were around you is maybe 100 people. But now there's billions of them. And again, that helps us sort of normalize the feelings and might lead, at least to some extent, towards tamping them down a little bit and keeping them in perspective.
So not letting the feeling overwhelm us.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, in the CrossFit case and some of the other cases, I don't know, I find it helpful to sort of think, oh, this is why I'm having that sensation. This is the explanation for it. And that somehow, takes some of the blood out of it, at least for me.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you talk about CrossFit or just working out, going into it, you sort of go, oh, you have the feeling like, I don't want to go into this. And if you think
Yeah.
about your example, then you're like, well, yeah, you're not going to put yourself in a chase from a tiger, are you?
Yeah.
But then when
Yeah.
you're doing
Yeah.
it, you get all those feelings and chemicals and endorphins rushing through you that it feels good and you keep going.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, then there's the game aspect of it, which is another thing that I think is very puzzling, is how much people enjoy games and puzzles. Um, we talked about Sudoku a second ago. My dad is like an expert crossword solver and creator, and one of the things I was interested in is like, why are these things so fun? There's lots of things that are fun where there's not great explanations for them in psychology. So, for example, dancing. I did a project back in the day to try to understand why people enjoy dancing. It's very mysterious. If you just ask yourself, well, you've got a couple of people and they're moving in synchrony with each other, and sometimes they're not even touching, so you can't even make this argument about, well, human contact. But there's something very phenomenologically enjoyable about you're with other people, you're moving to the same rhythm. There's something really fun about that. And it's sort of hard, like as far as I know, there's no great explanations for why that is. And I think, there just for your viewers who are wondering if there are still frontiers of psychology to explore, the answer of that is yeah. I think, there's room for creative people to come along and help us understand some of these. Humans are weird in so many ways.
Well, the mind is quite complex, isn't it, really? And how it attaches to the body and our physiology and all that is just crazy complicated.
Crazy complicated. Yeah, I remember as when I was in grad school, I'll tell you personally, when I was in grad school, I started my advisor, and in some sense, the Darwinian approach to psychology I thought was so powerful that, oh, we can just use the same ideas from evolution to explain humans that we do for, you know, mussels and chimpanzees and whatever. And I said to him, well, aren't we sort of making ourselves obsolescent because we're just going to figure it all out in 10 years or something like that? And he just laughed. This is John Tooby, unfortunately passed away recently, but he just laughed at me. He said, yeah, you still have not developed the right respect for how complicated the mind is. We're still going to be doing this in 100 years. And I think he was right about that. And, the pace of knowledge is slow because the way I think about it is, you got these brains, and there's, millions of neurons, billions of connections. And then you have social behavior, which is this brain is talking to your brain.
Mm.
And so then you've got whole cultures. So it's very complicated. And I think you're right that in some ways, I think people have underestimated how complicated psychology is. And this has a big difference again to go in the clinic. If you think understanding a normal working brain is hard, imagine trying to figure out how a broken brain, how to fix it. I mean, imagine you have the most complicated machine ever, and it's like not working quite right. You have to be like, okay, well, man, it would be easier to fix it if I understood exactly how it worked in the first place, but we don't even understand that. So
Interesting.
clinical psychology, yeah, you know what I mean?
In psychology, like, I mean, what I think, well, you just made me think about it anyway, is you've got one person, the psychologist and the patient, and they've both got these brains that are wired in their own ways, and you've got one trying to help the other with two brains that we still really don't understand that well. Like, how does that work?
That's a great question. Yeah, I've had some. Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'll say this, which is, I think that humans evolved in this world where having friends and allies is incredibly important, right? If you didn't have friends and
Right.
allies, and
Right.
you would be whatever. I think when people get into the clinic, they sort of have this experience of having someone who is almost like an unconditional friend,
Yeah.
someone who's, they might
Someone's
challenge
there
them a little.
listening and yeah.
Exactly. Then and it's not going to say, and it's not going to take them to task. You did what to who or whatever. And I think again, going back to the sense of phenomenology, is that puts our mind at rest to have at least one contact, a sort of an unconditional friend. It's almost like having, another family member. And so I think the experience in the clinic is often one where, so let me just, if you go into psychology today, the website, you'll find, I don't know, dozens of so-called modalities, right? There's horse therapy and talk therapy and psychoanalytic therapy and, crystal therapy, whatever.
Yeah.
And, there's this really great research that shows more or less, in many cases, these therapeutic modalities all have basically the same effect, which is small, but not nothing. There's a couple of exceptions. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a bit better than some of the others. And then you want to say, well, wait a second. How can all of these techniques give you roughly the same outcome? Like they seem really different, like horse therapy, crystal therapy, and cognitive therapy. Those are really different. But maybe what unites all of them is the fact that there's the relationship you just talked about between the clinician and the client. A relationship where there's someone to listen, and maybe they're going to listen to you and they're going to talk about their particular thing in terms of their therapeutic technique. But like having one kind of social contact and unconditional friend, maybe that's a source of a lot of the benefit that people get from being in the clinic. And that's why they're all basically having the same effect, is because it's not what the person's saying. It's not that they're sitting there saying, well, what you need to do is, challenge your boss gently but firmly and tell them you're not coming in on Saturday or whatever it is. I don't know what it is. It's just, yeah, tell me about your boss. Tell me how he's a jerk. Yeah, he's a jerk. Yeah. And from your brain's point of view, you're like, oh, cool. Someone else thinks my boss is a jerk. That's comforting. Someone's on my side. I like that.
Yeah.
And so this sort of sense of sides, I think, is a huge part of human psychology.
Just a platform to be heard. But I mean, I guess you're right. I mean, there is skill to it and there is tools to it. And I guess people do relate to people differently too, because I've never been to a psychologist, so I don't really know, but I have heard that people go here and they say, oh, I didn't really get along there, but over here it was great, so you find that match too.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to say there's not differences in skill among therapists. I mean, I'm very lucky. I have a couple of friends who are incredibly skilled therapists, but I think you're right, is that my guess, if I had to guess, would be it's a little bit like, I don't know if you ever met someone and you just feel like, oh, this is definitely going to be a friend of mine. We just resonate. There's something about it. My sense is that this happens in the therapeutic relationship too. There's some where you're like, oh, I get this person, they understand me. And the reverse, which is, we just don't share certain values, or we don't share certain kinds of ways of communicating. And so what that suggests is that, you're sort of like testing the different therapists for not necessarily for the one that has the best technique, although I'm sure that's important, but a little bit of who matches me in terms of who's going to be a good ally in my social life. One of the things that I found interesting in psychology is that, very few people think of friends in the same way they think about allies, like friends. It's weirdly understudied in psychology. There's a whole close relationships literature, but a lot of that is about family members and so on. But I think one way to think about it is we're going around the world looking for people who are going to be on our side, and I think therapists often are sort of playing that role.
Yeah. Well, we're looking for that. Culturally now, aren't we, in society? This idea of sides is becoming more paramount, right? You're either there or you're over there, and if you're over there, well, don't like you.
Oh, totally. Which is, I think that's a really good insight. and I don't completely understand it, but certainly in this country, again, I confess I'm pretty innocent when it comes to Australian politics. But certainly in this country, and that's right, that this tribalism has really become shockingly important. And I think that helps to explain why people are sort of endorsing ideas and slogans and so on that signal which kind of group they're in, is for exactly the reason that you're alluding to. You want to say, oh, no, I'm a good group member. And so if the group thinks this and is on this side, then I'm going to take that side. And you might not know anything about it. One of the things that, I think has been jarring to me, I mean, it's not scientific evidence, but you have people go into protests and you stick a microphone in someone's face and you say, oh, what do you know about this cause that you're protesting? And you ask a couple basic questions, and it's clear the person has no idea.
Yeah.
So it's not that they thought about it and they said, oh, this is the position I'm taking. They're there because they want to signal, I'm on this team. Like, this is the group that I'm in. I'm with you all. I don't know what you think. And that is an interesting, to me, such an important issue right now, because if people are just tribal as opposed to thinking through these interesting policy questions, that doesn't seem.
Yeah, it's kind of like going to a sport game and you're cheering for your team, but you're booing for the other team, and that guy over there that's cheering for the other team, you don't like him.
Yeah.
Yet afterwards, you could equally go to a bar and be best friends.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, and I think that last piece you just put your finger on is important, which is that people, the thing about so-called in-group love or tribalism or group loyalty is that particularly now it has this out-group hate to it in a lot of our political dialogue. So it's not just I love my guys. It's that I hate you guys, and not only that, but I don't just hate you. Is that you're the language of morality that has been layered into the political discussion. It's not that I disagree with you, is that you are bad for having that point of view. And that is dangerous, it seems to me, when we moralize the tribal identities. And again, right now here in the US, we're having our, one of our national conventions. And so we're seeing this kind of language on the national stage. And I'm not saying it's one-sided. Of course, both sides do it. But this idea that, I don't disagree. It's more about how you are a bad person. I think that is a very unpleasant aspect of the modern world. And,
make a good point. I think it's become, and you probably touched on this, but too simple or too easy for us to just follow that group, and we just decided, well, that's who we are, and that's who we're aligned with, and it's just a tagline that we're aligned with. We don't actually give ourselves the time to delve in deeper to what we're for, what we're all about. You're just saying that's me and that's it, and then creating this hate over just that simple thing. It's like getting angry over that guy crossing you off in the road.
I agree. And, that takes us back, because I've puzzled about this. I do find it puzzling to have people, when I think about people out there, protesting, and then it turns out they don't really know what they're talking about. I've asked myself, why is that? And I'll just tell you this one, I have a friend, love him to death. But one of the odd conversations we have is, he'll say, I don't understand this argument that you're making, but I know that you're wrong. And I just feel like, well, hold on a second here. So the first thing means you can't possibly know the second thing. And this goes back to the point about effort, which is, look, we're all busy, and it's a pain to learn about stuff. I mean, in the modern moment, here, what are the big issues, right? I mean, we just had some people chime in on some new economic policies they want to implement. Obviously, we have conflict in the Middle East, and going back to this point of effort, it's effortful to learn new information. And part of the reason that it's effortful is because, and here's what I really think about the sense of effort, is that I suspect that the effort that you feel really does depend on what you think the next best thing you could be doing is. In economics, we call this the opportunity cost. So
right. Yes, I've heard this. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't, I have this feeling that as our little devices, our phones, our tablets, whatever else we've got these days, have more little ways to give us rewards, whether, we're playing Candy Crush, or we're getting likes on our posts or whatever,
Yeah.
that doing anything else becomes more effortful, because in the back of our mind, we're like, well, but I could be looking at my Instagram feed. There could be anything in there. I might have gotten, I might have gone viral for my picture in front of, the Mona Lisa, or I don't know, whatever. And so that's super interesting to me, because if effort has to do with this possibility that we could be doing something else more psychologically rewarding, then this problem is just going to get worse. Because as companies work hard to deliver fun stuff on our devices, then the opportunity cost of doing whatever we're doing now gets higher and higher, because they're feeding us this like incredibly tempting stream or thread or whatever you want to say. That to me is also scary. My John Hyde is a psychologist. You might have heard of him. So, he's talked a lot about what are phones doing to the most malleable minds, adolescent minds, young minds.
Yeah.
And, and his view is, nothing good, basically. And he's made a strong case. I think the jury's still out, but he's made a strong case. But imagine I can't even imagine if I were 13 right now and I had the vocabulary of video games and experiences, I would never leave the house. We're too tempted. And so, and by that, I mean, look, our brains are constantly asking this question in the background: could I be doing something more interesting? Like, I don't know if everyone has experienced this, right? You're at a party and you're talking to somebody, but not the person you want to talk to. And it's sort of, then the conversation doesn't feel as interesting. You're like, well, could be talking to them.
Yeah.
And this is a way when evolution, I think, has really hurt us, because we're constantly, ruminating on alternatives.
Yeah. It's doing the total opposite of what it's supposed to do. I was going to ask you that question about how our feelings drive us. And sometimes we have a feeling that drives us to do more of what we should be doing, the good thing, the common sense stuff. But then often we have the times of doing these things based on our feelings, because it actually leads to being not so good for us, bad for us. Like playing those video games on your phone constantly. I don't think it can be a good thing. For some people, they make a lot of success out of it and money and all that sort of stuff. But for the most, it's not a good use of time, in my opinion.
I agree with you. And that it's tricky because, again, as you know, now I spend time with economists. I'm a big fan of capitalism. But when I think about the rewards that companies get for figuring out ways to have us spend an extra half a second on that phone, an extra half a second on your site, they're tremendous rewards. So we're living in this world where companies are constantly trying to farm our attention, and they're getting better and better and better at it. To me, that but we thought it was, we just thought it was the best thing ever. You could play a game on a computer screen, and if that was caffeine, video games now are crack cocaine. I mean, they're just so much more compelling. It's not surprising to me that people don't want to leave their screens. And I get it. Like, the companies want to make money and people want to be entertained. And what are they not doing?
You talk about that opportunity cost. And I was thinking about that. Like, there's a lot of things that I do in my life. I know that, sometimes I go, look back or forward. It's just like, what did I do that for? Like, I could have been doing this, and I still went and did that, because it just seemed like it was the easier path and it was going to give me the best feeling in the moment, without thinking about the long-term feeling.
Yeah.
Why don't we think about the short-term feeling over the long-term feeling more?
Yeah, that's one of the big questions is
we're not feeling it.
That's exactly right. Like, we're often tempted to do, and you see this in lots of different domains, right? So like, I want to eat the cake, but I know that in the long term, that's bad for me. I want to watch TV, not go to the gym, but I know that's bad for me. And so we live in this world where I think you have to take, I think there's like current Rob and then there's future Rob. And so current Rob has this responsibility to kind of constrain future Rob's behavior in various ways. This is why people do funny stuff. Like I remember there's an economist named Stephen Landsberg. He talked about how people lock the refrigerator door and it was refrigerator. Yeah, so they couldn't snack is the idea at night. So there's like a time lock on it. And from an and you sort of that's like a fight between me right now and the guy who's going to be up at 3 in the morning and be like, hey, you know what I really like is some cheese or something like that. And so we're kind of fighting these battles with ourselves. And the lock with a timer on it is a way to kind of like for current me to say, look, future you make the long-term choice, not the short-term choice. Yeah. So one thing I've done is I've tried to use the world to some people turn the internet off on their computer so they can only write. I've told my partner, I've asked her to check in with me because I'm trying to write a certain number of words a day on this book project. And the idea is to have some accountability so that when I'm faced with this decision, should I waste time watching a show or whatever it is I'm going to do or getting the words done, I'm going to like, well, she's going to ask me if I got the words done. So I better write. So I'm using her, like as a little, maybe it's not nice, but sort of as a tool is not exactly the right way to put it, but as a technique, let's say, as a social way, you know what I mean? It's like when people try and quit smoking and they have a buddy who's like, make sure I don't whatever, or, but it's hard. Look, the world is a tempting place now. It's not like it was.
Well, I think to create those disciplines where we started the conversation was this idea of meditation and awareness. And I think if you can develop that, start small and grow that level of awareness through meditation practices, that's when you can become really good at managing that better and maybe not perfect, but better. And I think if you can be a bit better, then that's great.
I think that's exactly right. And I think what your point there, your little parenthetical remark about not perfect is so important. One of the things about meditation is, this idea that you have to be patient with the fact that sometimes your mind is going to wander and then, okay, well, that happens. Just bring it back. I've been heavily influenced both in the context of meditation and in the context of his work by Sam Harris, the now podcaster, former neuroscientist. Yeah. And I don't think it's a coincidence that here's a guy who is very into meditation and so on. And at some point, I think it was a couple of years ago, I think it was during COVID, maybe, he announced that he was going to get off of the social media platforms, Twitter, now X. And I feel like the meditation in some ways wasn't, that like it caused him to have that kind of realization. He's like, wait, why am I spending my time arguing with people on this platform? I want my experience to be positive. I want it to be about my family and my friends and the ideas that I care about. And there's something kind of deep about that where you're, and look, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's hard. And I think people who leave these things sometimes report, they kind of miss them a little bit and they feel like they're out of the loop or whatever. But to your point, what meditation does is it sort of focuses you a little bit more on, well, is that the experience that I want to have in life? Do I want my life to be reading, 255 characters at a time? Or do I want it to be, let me spend some time outside with some close friends? Or, let me learn something new that I didn't know before. And again, you're not going to be perfect. But I think the meditation thing, it does focus your attention on the fact that, at least my view is all we have is our experiences. That's all you get. Obviously there's the behavior and you affect other people, but, the question is, I think a question is, how to maximize happiness. And that has something to do with thinking about the ways you're going to spend your time that are going to be most rewarding. It's hard, it's hard, but the cake and so on are tempting. And then the question is, how do you deal with those temptations?
Yeah. I like it. I appreciate your time, Robert. We could keep going because this is an interesting conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show. How can people best reach out to you and find out more about your work?
Well, the best thing is to go on Substack. We have a Substack called Living Fossils, and there will be a book before too long. We'll announce it on the site, but that's the best place to come see me these days. As you said, there's a couple of books, Why Everyone Else is a Hypocrite, and The Hidden Agenda, The Political Mind, available where books are sold. But I also just want to say thanks for having me on the show. I really enjoyed having this opportunity to chat with you.
It's a great conversation. So guys, check it out at thehiddenwhy.com. I'll stick the links for the books and the websites there, so you can reach out to Rob and thank him for coming on the show too. Thanks so much, mate. Appreciate you. And
I appreciate you.
there,
Namaste. Yeah, namaste.
live more fully, have more meaning, find more joy. Talk soon. Thanks, guys, for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. I hope you love what you're hearing. If you like this episode, guys, or any of the episodes that you're listening to here at The Hidden Why, please do me a favor by sharing it. You can share it with your families. You can share it with your loved ones. You can do that by using your favorite social media channels, using the icons on the platform that you're listening to The Hidden Why podcast. Also, guys, if you're a fan of the show, please connect with me. Connect with me at thehiddenwhy.com. I love to hear from you. I love to converse with the people that listen to this show to find out what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, and perhaps if they have any questions or feedback for the show as well. You can stay up to date with all that I'm releasing here, guys. I do a solo show every Monday, a 3-minute thought every Thursday. I do 2 interviews a week on Wednesday and a Saturday, and a book review every Friday. You can stay up to date with all that by subscribing to my newsletter at thehiddenwhy.com. Just enter your email address there, and also subscribing to the podcast on the platform that you choose to listen to your podcasts. You can also support the show, guys, by using the Amazon links at thehiddenwhy.com. So if you like books, you can get all the books that I review there, and anything else really that you like to purchase through Amazon. So use that link, it helps support the show. And we've also got a deal with Audible, guys. Audible is a fantastic way to listen to all your favorite books. We've got a deal with them so you can get 2 free books when you subscribe subscribe to a 30-day free trial. So check that out again at thehiddenwhy.com. Guys, that's it from me. You know what to do. Go out there, breathe more passion into every single moment. Do everything with greater purpose, and in doing so you will discover your hidden why. This is The Hidden Why. My name is Lee Martinuzzi. Until next time, peace, passion and purpose. See you soon.